Fauci's been in the US government advising presidents since I think 1984. I mean, the only person with that kind of longevity that springs to mind is J. Edgar Hoover, that could span across so many administrations and, have so much detailed knowledge or control about what's going on behind the scenes. And yet the first time I met him is at these briefings. And quite honestly, he comes across as kind of that country doctor, the one that kind of has that all-knowing, trusting mannerisms about him. But a different guy.
Yeah. Yeah. The guy I know is a power hungry, my way or the highway, literally, criminal who will get his way at all costs, no matter how many lives or careers he stomps on along the way.
And he had you silenced for 5 years.
Yeah, he had me. He directed the confiscation of my 30 years worth of work from my lab. Then the night I was fired on September 29th of 2011. In the next 6 weeks, his grants administrators went to my laboratories to make certain everything was in place with respect to my data, my IRB, my Institutional Review Board, protected data of names and patients and people. Everything was there. I was then arrested on, and I had to clarify this over the last 24 hours, on felony charges of being a fugitive from justice. And yet the police in Ventura who arrested me, this is November 18th, 2011, as they're conducting their assurances, they've got all the data that I refused to say didn't exist, and the viruses didn't exist, and the blood supply wasn't contaminated, and the vaccines weren't heavily contaminated. Those data on November 18th, I was arrested as a fugitive from justice. 2011, I was held in jail without bond, without bail, on a bail hold. I saw not a judge or an attorney in those 5 days, and I was continually attempted to be coerced into signing an apology that would, and everything would go away if I signed the apology, which read like a confession that said I'd basically made up these mouse cancer-causing viruses and their contamination of the blood supply in our research. I made that all up for my greater glory, and I would spend the rest of my life doing honest research. And I said to my husband, who was trying desperately to get me to sign the piece of paper to get me out of jail, as they had been threatening and extorting him that he'd never see me again for those 5 days. I told my husband, I spent my entire life doing honest research, and I will continue to do honest research, and I will never sign that piece of paper. And as I quoted in an email that I wrote to the head of the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute, I will spend the rest of my life making sure you don't perpetrate these crimes on these innocent victims again. They've done it once or twice and never again. And I've kept that promise. That's that entire email, August 31st, 2011, as they planned the destruction of my career, the destruction of my economic life, and on several occasions, attempts to either kill me or get me to kill myself.
Kill you?
And that's clear in the book, Plague of Corruption.
How did they try to kill you?
I was riding my bicycle, and they followed me down the street, taking pictures in a kind of unmarked truck with a gun in the back. And you could see that underneath that bike riding garb, they were trying to figure out if it was me. I was riding alone on a desolate road, and all they would have had to do was pick me up off that bike and throw me over there and say I killed myself. On one occasion, which is the the first chapter of the book, Plague of Corruption. It's called Scientists at Sea. They surrounded my house at 4 a.m. We didn't know who they were. Basically, we escaped out the back door on our 13-foot Boston whaler, and hid for 5 days until I got a lawyer who said, "Oh, you didn't do anything wrong. This is no problem. It's not a problem." So on many occasions, I was followed. I was watched. I was said to be a drunk. I was said to be suicidal. And of course I wasn't. So it was, those 6 weeks were among the most horrific of my life. And as I wrote in the first book, Plague, being arrested and held in jail, at least I knew I was safe. The horror was I didn't know what was happening to my husband, and the mental torture and the extortion they put him under. It took him years to recover from.
And why come out now? Why talk so much now?
Well, our first book came out in 2014. So I was in that so-called silencing time. I was told, so these felony charges that I'll just explain why I've said in the video Plandemic that there were no charges, because the felony charges were for, as I was said to be a fugitive from justice. And yet, no Ventura, Reno, Sparks, Washoe County issued a warrant for arrest on any charge. So they said perhaps it was some of the federal agencies in Washoe County. Now, we knew at NIH, after I was released from jail, the NIH and the National Cancer Institute, where I was to conduct the multi-center study, the NIH, as I tried to go on post to the laboratories of Dr. Rossetti to do the study, I was said to be a fugitive from justice. And I was threatened to be detained. And that was true on November 14th, 2016, 5 years later. So it's not why now. I was only allowed to talk to my lawyers or my family by email. No Facebook, no social media. If I used computers or did anything as they watched me electronically and in every other way, I would be arrested again, and then this time in Nevada, where I would never be released, according to them. That was the extortion. So I didn't dare do anything other than talk to my lawyers and my family by email. But you notice that Ken Lively is a lawyer. So Ken Lively, as soon as I got out of jail, encouraged me to tell the story. So we taped every word of it. We backed it up with emails. We backed it up with Tony Fauci's own words saying I'd be arrested if I, if I went to NIH. And I was prevented to go do the multi-center study because if I flew through NIH airspace. I lived in Frederick, Maryland for 22 years, and my mother lived there, and I couldn't land at Dulles Airport. What do you think I was doing? Sprinkling virus dust over the, and these are the kinds of things that are in the book. Kent taped every word of it, transcribed every word of it. So I'm not coming out now. These 2 books have been in process since the day I came out of jail, since the day I was allowed to talk publicly again, which I believe was October 17th or October 15th of 2015. That's when the criminal charges that were baseless. There never was a charge. Now, I've seen she stole something. Nope. The charges were listed as fugitive from justice, the same charge that was at NIH the last time I was there at the National Cancer Institute in Frederick, Maryland on November 15, 2016. It was, how can you be a fugitive from justice if there's no warrant in any state in the land for any reason, not so much as a parking ticket? So there were no charges. This was fraud and extortion and an attempt to silence me, but I couldn't take the chance because it almost killed my husband the first time.